Hello and welcome back to the Gentleman Psychic. I see we have one person who is here waiting already. Hello and welcome. I am going to go right over here now and do some quick transferring over of this podcast, this show, so that people can see me. Let me see. Come on, there we go. And then we'll hit here, we'll hit the share button. I'm getting pretty good at this. You would think I would have already learned. Hello, Adria, good to see you. Copy that, share, copy link. Facebook, the book of faces, as I like to say. And then we'll go over to the Gentleman Psychic, create post. Join me live for story time. And then it has to think for a second. Spinny wheel of death, you know. And we share, publish that. And then we go over here to my other one. Join me live for story time. And then we paste that one there. And then we hit the post button. And oh, hi, Raven. Good evening. Hi, Christy. Good evening. We have 6 viewers. So lovely to have you. So that was done. We got that part done. I'll leave this out just in case I get. Sometimes I get so enthralled in the book that I don't know that we have lost. Hi, Matt. Good to see you. That we've lost connection. So this way, I will know if we did, because someone will text me. Hi, Mary Jane. Good to see you. So I have some exciting things to show, some lovely things to share. And first of all, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here today. I just realized as I was going on that I forgot to turn on the monetization. So this video is not going to be paid. So not that I make a lot of money from that anyway, but anyway, that'll help with the donations. Later on, you can go to the things. But first of all, I want to talk about something that was sent to me by a friend of mine. This is a lovely magic wand that she has sent. It has a real antler, and she has handcrafted these, and it's got encrusted with semi-precious stones. This is quartz. And if you would like to procure one yourself, you can contact her. Let me go right back over here so that I want to make certain I'm getting it correctly. It is willowweeps@gmail.com. It's Wicked's Temple, and it's Weeps with a Z. Willow, WILLOWWEEPZ @gmail.com, or you can go on to Etsy.com and look for Wicked's Temple, like that. Oh, it's backwards. But anyway, you get the idea. Wicked's Temple. She creates these wonderful magic wands. You can get one yourself. So make certain that you go over there and look for her. Thank you, Carnation. Hello, Alex. Thank you. So yes, Wicked's Temple on Etsy. You can go over there. She makes these beautiful things. Make certain that you tell her that I sent you. So there you go. You too can have one of those lovely magic wands. Also, I wanted to talk a little bit about, for those of you who remember, my very dear friend passed away a few days ago. Mr. John Thompson is his name, and he was such a kind, wonderful, beautiful, good friend of mine, and he has helped me with my car. Mr. Satan, as you know, is the oh yes, thank you, Adria, thank you. Hello, Lakos, good to see you. So anyway, John Thompson helped me get Mr. Satan, my car, all together. And without his help, I wouldn't have Mr. Satan. So when he passed away, it was rather sudden. And I am creating a painting, as you know, for those of you who follow me on other social media. I am creating tarot cards. So I am going to produce all 72. They will be contained as tarot cards that you yourself will at one time be able to purchase. I am I'm quite a ways off from creating them. I'm going to start with the major arcana, and then I will go from the major arcana into the rest of the cards. So I have quite a ways to go before they are available, but my artwork, my original artwork, is available. And the one that I'm creating for the chariot, when this painting sells, all proceeds will go to the family of my good friend John Thompson, Johnny on the spot, as he liked to be called. And this is what I'm working on. He and I are going to be in the car together. It'll have a biplane here. I've still got paint on my hands from painting this afternoon, well, even up until 30 minutes ago. But there's going to be a biplane here, and it'll have Johnny on the spot written across. But this is going to be for the chariot card. And again, to purchase this, you can send me a message through the Gentleman Psychic, through Facebook under Richard Lale Lillard, whatever it may be, however, but we'll be doing a bidding style, sort of like an auction style. So this will come up for sale, and people will be able to bid on this and take this original work home. And again, all proceeds from this will go to the family of a good man who was taken much too soon. Well, that is all I have in way of announcements. And thank you for all of the lovely comments. Thank you for all of the shares. Thank you for all the likes. Since I forgot to do the monetization on this video, if you will share it, if you will like it, if you will comment, it will help me out because of the algorithms. Anyway, I thought we would be finished by now, but clearly we are not. So here we go with the, thank you very much, Raven. That's very sweet. Thank you. So here we go with The Sorrows of Satan, part 22. I don't know what chapter that is, though. We are on I'll tell you what chapter we're on. 40. That's what that is. Chapter 40. Thunder and wild tumult, the glare of lightning, the shattering roar of great waves leaping mountains high and hissing asunder in midair. To this fierce riot of savage elements let loose in a whirling, boisterous dance of death, I woke at last with convulsive shock. Staggering to my feet, I stood in the black obscurity of my cabin, trying to rally my scattered forces. Oh, I guess I should recap. So Sybil is dead. Our hero has gone with Prince Ramirez to explore. He felt like he was sick. He needed to go back. He kept seeing these demons come after him. And then in a fever rage, he goes back to his cabin on the yacht, and he talks about he's about to kill himself, and Prince Ramirez comes in, and he says, "Is this any way? I'm your friend, and this is how you pay no mind to this?" And Prince Ramirez says, "I am not your friend. I am your enemy." So that was a little catch up of where we were, and now here we are. Again, chapter 40. Thunder and tumult, the glare of lightning, the shattering roar of great waves leaping mountains high and hissing asunder in midair. To this fierce riot of savage elements, let loose in whirling, boisterous dance of death, I woke at last with convulsive shock. Staggering to my feet, I stood in the black obscurity of my cabin, trying to rally my scattered forces. The electric lamps were extinguished, and the lightning alone illumined the sepulchral darkness. Frantic shoutings echoed above me on deck, fiend-like yells that sounded now like triumph, now like despair, and again like the furious billows, and every frightful crash of thunder threatened, as it seemed, to split her in twain. The wind howled like a devil in torment. It screamed and moaned and sobbed as though endowed with sentient body that suffered acute agony. Acutest agony. Anon, it rushed downwards with an angry swoop, as wide flapping wings, and at each raging gust I thought the vessel must surely founder. Forgetting everything but immediate personal danger, I tried to open my door. It was locked. Outside, I was a prisoner. My indignation at this discovery exceeded every other feeling, and beating with both hands on the wooden panels, I called, I shouted, I threatened, I swore, all in vain. Thrown down twice by topsy-turvy lurching of the yacht, I still kept up the desperate hammering and calling, striving to raise my voice above the distracting pandemonium of noise that seemed to possess the ship from the end to end, but all to no purpose. And finally, hoarse and exhausted, I stopped and leaned against the unyielding door to recover my breath and strength. The storm appeared to be increasing in force and clamor. The lightning was well nigh incessant, and the clattering thunder followed each flash so instantaneously as to leave no doubt but that it was immediately above us. I listened, and presently heard a frenzied cry, "Breakers ahead!" This was followed by peals of discordant laughter. Terrified, sorry. Breakers ahead. This was followed by peals of discordant laughter. Terrified, I strained my ears for every sound, and all at once someone spoke to me quite closely, as though the very darkness around me had found a tongue. Breakers ahead. Throughout the world, storm and danger, doom and death, but afterwards life. A certain intonation in these words filled me with such frantic horror that I fell on my knees in abject misery and almost prayed to the God I had through all of my life disbelieved in and denied. But I was too mad with fear to find words. The dense blackness, the horrid uproar of the wind and sea, the infuriated and confused shouting, all this was to my mind as though hell itself had broken loose, and I could only kneel dumbly and tremble. Suddenly, a swirling sound, as of an approaching monstrous whirlwind, made itself heard above all the rest of the din. A sound that gradually resolved itself into a howling chorus of 1,000 voices sweeping along one on gusty blast. Fierce cries were mingled with the jarring thunder, and I leapt erect as I caught the words of the clangorous shout, "Ave Satanas! Ave!" Rigidly upright, with limbs stiffening for sheer terror, I stood listening. The waves seemed to roar, "Ave Satanas!" The wind shrieked to it, the thunder, the lightning wrote it in a snaky line of fire on the darkness, "Ave Satanas!" My brain swam around and grew full of bursting. I was going mad, raving mad, surely, or why should I thus distinctly hear such unmeaning sounds as these? With a sudden access of superhuman force, I threw the whole weight of my body against the door of my cabin in a delirious effort to break it open. It yielded slightly, and I prepared myself for another rush and similar attempt, when all at once it was flung widely back, admitting a stream of pale light, and Lucio, wrapped in heavy shrouding garments, confronted me. "Follow me, Geoffrey Tempest," he said in a low, clear tones. "Your time has come." He spoke. All self-possession deserted me. The terrors of the storm, and now the terror of his presence, overwhelmed my strength, and I stretched out my hands to him appealingly, unknowing what I did or said. "For God's sake," I began wildly. He silenced me by an imperious gesture. "Spare me your prayers, for God's sake, for your own sake, and for mine. Follow." He moved before me like a black phantom in a pale, strange light surrounding him, and I, dazzled, dazed, and terror-stricken, trod in his steps closely, moved, as it seemed, by some violation not my own, till I found myself alone with him in the saloon of the yacht, with the waves hissing up against the windows like live snakes ready to sting. Trembling and scarcely able to stand, I sank on a chair. He turned round and looked at me for a moment meditatively. Then he threw open one of the windows. A huge wave dashed in and scattered its bitter salt spray upon me where I sat. But I heeded nothing. My agonized looks were fixed on him, the being I had so long made the companion of my days. Raising his hand with a gesture of authority, he said, "Back, ye devils of the sea and wind, ye which are not God's elements, but my servants, the unrepenting souls of men lost in the waves of world and the hurricane. Whichever ye have made your destiny, get hence and cease your clamor. This hour is mine." Panic-stricken, I heard. Aghast, I saw the great billows that had shouldered up the myriads against the vessel sink suddenly. The yelling wind dropped, silenced. The yacht glided along with smooth, even motion as though on a tranquil inland lake. And almost before I could realize it, the light of the full moon beamed forth brilliantly and fell in broad stream across the floor of the saloon. But in the very cessation of the storm, the words "Ave Satanas" trembled, as it were, upwards in my ears from the underworld of the sea, and died away in distance like a parting echo of thunder. Then Lucio faced me. With what a countenance of sublime and awful beauty! "Do you know me now, man whom my millions of dross have made wretched? Or do you need me to tell you who I am?" My lips moved, but I could not speak. The dim and dreadful thought was dawning on my mind seemed yet too frenzied, too outside the boundaries of material sense for mortal utterance. "Be dumb, be motionless, but hear and feel," he continued. "By the supreme power of God, for there is no other power in any world or in any heaven, I control and command you at this moment, your own will being set aside for once as naught. I choose you as one out of millions to learn in this life the lesson that all must learn hereafter. Let every faculty of your intelligence be ready to receive that which I shall impart, and teach it to your fellow men. If you have a conscience, as you have a soul." Again I strove to speak. He seemed so human, so much my friend still, though he had declared himself my enemy, and yet, what was that lambent radiance encircling his brows? That burning glory steadily deepening and flashing from his eyes? "You are one of the world's fortunate men," he went on, surveying me straightly and pitilessly. "So at least this world judges you, because you can buy its goodwill. But the powers that govern all worlds do not judge you by such a standard. You cannot buy their goodwill, not though all the churches should offer to sell it to you. They regard you as are stripped soul naked, not as you seem. They behold you in shameless egotist, persistently engaged in defacing their divine image of immortality. And for that sin there is no excuse and no escape but punishment. Whosoever prefers self to God, and in the arrogance of that self presumes to have doubt and deny God, invites another power to encompass his destinies, the power of evil, made evil and kept evil by the disobedience and wickedness of man alone. That power, whom mortals call Satan, Prince of Darkness, but whom once the angels knew as Lucifer, Prince of Light." He broke off, paused, and his flaming regard fell full upon me. "Do you know me now?" I sat, a rigid figure of fear, dumbly staring. Was this man, for he seemed man, mad that he should thus hint at a thing too wild and terrible for speech? If you do not know me, if you do not feel in your convicted soul that you are aware of me, it is because you will not know. Thus do I come upon men, when they rejoice in their wilful self-blindness and vanity. Thus do I become their constant companion, humoring them in such vices as they best love. Thus do I take on the shape that pleases them, and fit myself to their humours. They make me what I am. They mould my very form to the fashion and fitting time. Through all of their changing, repeating errors, they have found strange names and titles for me, and their creeds and churches have made a monster of me, as though imagination could compass any worse monster than the devil in man. Frozen and mute, I heard the dead silence, and his resonant voice vibrating through it seemed more terrific than the wildest storm. You, God's work, endowed as every conscious atom of his creation is endowed with infinite germ of immortality. You, absorbed in the gathering together of such perishable trash as you conceive good for yourself on this planet, you dare, in the puny reach of your mortal intelligence, to dispute and question the everlasting things invisible. You, by the Creator's will, are permitted to see the natural universe. But in mercy to you, the veil is drawn across the supernatural. For such things as exist, there would break your puny earth brain as a frail shell is broken by a passing wheel. And because you cannot see, you doubt. You doubt not only the surprising love and wisdom that keeps you in ignorance till you shall be strong enough to bear full knowledge, but you doubt the very fact of such another universe itself, arrogant fool. Your hours are counted by supernatural time. Your days are compassed by supernatural law. Your every thought, word, deed, and look must go to make up the essence and shape of your being in supernatural life hereafter. And what you have been in your soul here must and shall be the aspect of your soul there. That law knows no changing. The light about his face deepened. He went on in clear accents that vibrated with strangest music. Men make their own choice and form their own futures, he said, and never let them dare to say they are not free to choose. From the utmost reaches of high heaven, the Spirit of God descends to them as man. From the uttermost depths of the lowest hell, I, the spirit of rebellion, come equally as man. But the God in man was rejected and slain. I, the devil in man, live on, forever, accepted and adored. Man's choice this is, not God's or mine. Were the self-seeking human race once to reject me utterly, I should exist no more as I am, nor would they exist who they are with me. Listen, while I trace your career, it is a copy of the lives of many men, and judge how little the powers of heaven can have to do with you, how much the powers of hell. I shuddered involuntarily. Dimly I began to realize the awful nature of this unearthly interview. You, Geoffrey Tempest, are a man in whom a thought of God was once implanted, that subtle fire or note of music out of heaven called genius. So great a gift is rarely bestowed on any mortal, and woe betide him, who, having received it, holds it as of mere personal value, to be used for self and not for God. Divine laws moved you gently in the right path of study, the path of suffering, of disappointment, of self-denial and poverty. For only by these things is humanity made noble, and trained in the way of perfection. Through pain and enduring labor, the soul is armed for battle and strengthened for conquest. For it is more difficult to bear a victory well than to endure many buffetings of war. But you resented heaven's goodwill towards you. The valley of humiliation suited you not at all. Poverty maddened you. Starvation sickened you. Yet poverty is better than arrogant wealth, and starvation is healthier than self-indulgence. You could not wait. Your own troubles seemed to you enormous, your own efforts laudable and marvelous. The troubles and efforts of others were nothing to you. You were ready to curse God and die, compassionating yourself, admiring yourself and none other, with a heart full of bitterness and a mouth full of cursing. You were eager to make quick havoc of both your genius and your soul. For this cause, your millions of money came, and so did I. Standing now full height, he confronted me. His eyes were less brilliant, but they reflected in their dark splendor a passionate scorn and sorrow. O fool! In my very coming I warned you. On the very day we met, I told you I was not what I seemed. God's elements crashed a menace when we made our compact of friendship. And I, when I saw the faint last struggle of the not quite torpid soul in you to resist and distrust me, did I not urge you to let that better instinct have its way? You, jester with the supernatural, you, base scoffer at Christ, 1,000 hints have been given you, 1,000 chances of doing good, as must have forced me to leave you, as would have brought me to welcome respite from sorrow. A moment's cessation of torture. His brows contracted in a somber frown. He was silent a moment, then he resumed. Now learn from me the weaving of the web you so willingly became entangled in. Your millions of money were mine. The man that left you heir to them was a wretched miser, evil to the soul's core. By virtue of his own deeds, he and his dross were mine, and maddened by the sheer accumulation of world's wealth, he slew himself in a fit of frenzy. He lives again in a new and much more realistic phase of existence, and knows the actual value of mankind's cash payments. This you have yet to learn. He advanced a step or two, fixing his eyes more steadily upon me. Wealth is like genius, bestowed not for personal gratification, but for the benefit of those who lack it. What have you done for your fellow men? The very book you wrote and launched upon the tide of bribery and corruption was published with the intention to secure applause for yourself, not to give help or comfort to others. Your marriage was prompted by lust and ambition, and in the fair sensuality you wedded. You got your deserts. No love was in the union. It was sanctified by the blessing of fashion, but not the blessing of God. You have done without God, so you think. Every act of your existence has been for the pleasure and advancement of yourself, and this is why I have chosen you out to hear and to see what few mortals ever hear or see till they have passed the dividing line between this life and the next. I have chosen you because you are a type of that apparently respected and unblameable man. You are not what the world calls a criminal. You have murdered no one. You have stolen no neighbor's goods. Your unchasteness and adulteries are those of every fashionable vicemonger, and your blasphemies against the divine are no worse than those of the most approved modern magazine contributors. You are guilty, nevertheless, of the chief crime of the age, sensual egotism, the blackest sin known to either angels or devils, because hopeless. The murderer may repent and save 100 lives to make up for one he snatched. The thief may atone with honest labor. The adulterer may scourge his flesh and do grim penance for late pardon. The blasphemer may retrieve his blasphemies. But for the egotist, there is no chance of the wholesome penitence, since to himself he is perfect, and counts his creator as somewhat inferior. This present time of the world breathes egotism, the taint of self. The hideous worship of money corrodes all life, all thought, all feeling. For vulgar cash, the fairest and noblest scenes of nature are wantonly destroyed without protest. The earth, created in beauty, is made hideous. Parents and children, wives and husbands are ready to slay each other for a little gold. Heaven is barred out, God is denied, and destruction, darkness over this planet, known to all angels as the sorrowful star. Be no longer blind, millionaire whose millions have ministered to self without relieving sorrow. For when the world is totally corrupt, when self is dominant, when cunning supersedes honesty, when gold is man's chief ambition, when purity is condemned, when poets teach lewdness and scientists blasphemy, when love is mocked and God forgotten, the end is near. I take my part in the end, for the souls of mankind are not done with when they leave their fleshly tenements. When this planet is destroyed as a bubble broken in the air, the souls of men and women live on, as the soul of the woman you loved lives on, as the soul of the mother who bore her lives on, aye, as all my worshippers live on through a myriad worlds, a myriad phases, till they learn to shape their destinies for heaven. And I, with them, live on, in many shapes, in many ways. When they return to God, cleansed and perfect, so shall I return, but not until then. He paused again, and I heard a faint sighing sound everywhere as of wailing voices, and the name, Aramanes, was breathed suddenly upon the silence. I started up, listening, every nerve strained. Araminis, or Ramenes. I gazed fearfully at him, always beautiful. His countenance was now sublime, and his eyes shone with lustrous flame. You thought me friend, he said. You should have known me foe. For everyone who flatters a man for his virtues or humors him in his vices is that man's worst enemy, whether demon or angel. But you judged me a fitting comrade, hence I was bound to serve you, and my followers with me. You had no perception to realize this, you supreme scorner of the supernatural. Little did you think of the terrifying agencies that worked the wonders of your betrothal feast at Willowsmere. Little did you dream that fiends prepared the costly banquet and poured out the luscious wine. At this, a smothered groan of horror escaped me. I looked wildly round, longing to find some deep grave of oblivious rest wherein to fall. Aye, he continued. The festival was well fitted to the time of the world today, society gorging itself blind and senseless, and attended by the retinue up from hell. My servants looked like men, for truly there is little difference twixt man and devil. 'Twas a brave gathering. England has never seen so strange a one in all her annals. The sighing, wailing cries increased in loudness. My limbs shook under me, and all power of thought was paralyzed in my brain. He bent his piercing looks upon me with a new expression of infinite wonder, pity, and disdain. What a grotesque creation you are, men have made of me. What a grotesque creation you men have made of me, he said. As grotesque as your conception of God, with what trifling human attributes you have endowed me. Know you not the changeless yet ever-changing essence of immortal life can take a million shapes and yet remain unalterably the same? Were I as hideous as your churches figure me, could this eternal beauty with which all angels are endowed ever change to such loathsomeness as haunts mankind's distorted imaginations? Perchance it would be well, for none would make of me their comrade, and none would cherish me as friend. As fits each separate human nature, so seems my image. For thus is my fate, and punishment commanded. Yet even in this mask of man I wear, men own me their superior. Think you not that when the supreme spirit of God wore that same mask on earth, men did not know him for their master? Yea, they did know, and knowing him, murdered him, as they ever strive to murder all divine things as soon as their divinity is recognized. Face to face, I stood with him upon the mountain top, and there fulfilled my vow of temptation. Worlds and kingdoms, supremacies and powers, what were they to the ruler of them all? Get thee hence, Satan, said the golden-sounding voice. Ah, glorious behest, happy respite, for I reached the very gate of heaven that night, and heard the angels sing. His accent sank to an infinitely mournful cadence. What have your teachers done with me, and my eternal sorrows? He went on. Have not they and the unthinking churches proclaimed a lie against me, saying that I rejoice in evil? O man, to whom by God's will, and because the world's end draws nigh, I unveil a portion of the mystery of my doom. Learn now, once and for all, that there is no possible joy in evil. It is despair and discord of the universe. It is man's creation, my torment, God's sorrow. Every sin of every human being adds weight to my torture and length to my doom. Yet my oath against the world must be kept. I have sworn to tempt, to do my utmost to destroy mankind. But man has not sworn to yield to my tempting. He is free. Let him resist, and I depart. Let him accept me, I remain. Eternal justice is spoken. Humanity, through the teaching of God made human, must work out its own redemption, and mine. Here suddenly advancing, he stretched out his hand. His figure grew taller, vaster, and more majestic. Come with me now, he said in a low, penetrating voice that sounded sweet yet menacing. Come, for the veil is down for you tonight. You shall understand with whom you have dealt so long in your shifting cloud castle of life, and in what company you have sailed a perilous sea. One who, proud and rebellious like you, errs less in that he owns God as his master. At these words, a thundering crash assailed my ears. All the windows on either side of the saloon flew open and showed me a strange glitter as a steely spears pointed aloft to the moon. Then, half fainting, I felt myself grasped and lifted suddenly and forcibly upwards, and in another moment found myself on the deck of the Flame, held fast as a prisoner in the fierce grip of hands of the invisible. Raising my eyes in deadly despair, prepared for hellish tortures, and with horrible sense of conviction in my soul that it was too late to cry out to God for mercy, I saw around me a frozen world, a world that seemed as if the sun had never shone upon it. Thick, glassy green walls of ice pressed round the vessel on all sides and shut her in between their inflexible barriers. Fantastic palaces, pinnacles, towers, bridges, and arches of ice formed in their architectural outlines and groupings the semblance of the great city. Over all the coldly glistening peaks, the round moon, emerald pale, looking down, and standing opposite to me against the mast, I beheld, not Lucio, but an angel. 41. Crowned with a majestic radiance as of trembling stars of fire, that sublime figure towered between me and the moonlit sky. The face, austerely grand and beautiful, shone forth luminously pale. The eyes were full of unquenchable pain, unspeakable remorse, unimaginable despair. The features I had known so long and seen day by day in familiar intercourse were the same, yet transfigured with ethereal splendor, while shadowed by everlasting sorrow. Bodily sensations I was scarcely conscious of, only the soul of me, hitherto dormant, was awake and palpitating with fear. Gradually, I became aware that others were around me, and looking, I saw a dense crowd of faces, wild and wonderful. Imploring eyes were turned upon me with piteous or stern agony, and pallid hands were stretched towards me in more appeal than menace. And I beheld, as I gazed, the air darkening, and anon lighting with shadows and the brightness of wings. Vast pinions of crimson flame began to unfurl, and spread upwards all round the ice-bound vessel, upwards till their glowing tips seemed well nigh to touch the moon. And he, my foe, who leaned against the mast, became likewise encircled with these shafted pinions of burning rose, which, like finely webbed clouds, coloured by a strong sunset, streamed outwards flaringly from his dark form, and sprang aloft in a blaze of scintillant glory. And a voice infinitely sad, yet infinitely sweet, struck solemn music from the frozen silence. Steer onward, Amiel, onward to the boundaries of the world. With every spiritual sense aroused, I glanced toward the steersman's wheel. Was that Amiel? That being stern, a figure of deadliest fate, with stable wings and tortured countenance? If so, I knew him for a fiend in very truth, if burning horror and endless shame can so transfigure the soul of man. A history of crime was written in his anguished looks. What secret torment racked him no living mortal might dare to guess. With pallid skeleton hands he moved the wheel, and as it turned, the walls of ice round us began to split with a noise of thunder. Onward, Amiel, said the great sad voice again. Onward where never man hath trod, steer on to the world's end. The crowd of weird and terrible faces grew denser. The flaming and darkening of wings became thicker, and driving storm clouds went rent by lightning. Wailing cries, groans, and dreary sounds of sobbing echoed about me on all sides. Again the shattering ice roared like an earthquake under the waters. And, unhindered by her frozen prison walls, the ship moved on. Dizzily, and as one in a mad dream, I saw the great glittering bergs rock and bend forward. The massive ice city shook to its foundations. Glistening pinnacles dropped and vanished. Towers lurched over, broke, and plunged into the sea. Huge mountains of ice split up like fine glass, yawning asunder with green glare to the moonlight as the flame propelled, so it seemed, by the demon wings of her terrific crew, cut through the frozen passage with the sharpness of a sword and the swiftness of an arrow. Whither we were bound, I dared not think. I deemed myself dead. The world I saw was not the world I knew. I believed I was in some spirit land beyond the grave, whose secrets I should presently realize perchance too well. On we went, I keeping my strained sight fixed for the most part on the supreme shape that always confronted me, that angel foe whose eyes were wild with an eternity of sorrows. Face to face with such an immortal despair, I stood, confounded and slain forever in my own regard, a worthless atom, meriting naught but annihilation. The wailing cries and groans had ceased, and we sped on in an awful silence. While countless tragedies, unnameable griefs were urged upon me in the dumb eloquence of the dreary faces around me and the expressive teachings of their terrific eyes. Soon the barriers of ice were passed, and the flame floated out beyond them into a warm inland sea, calm as a lake and bright as silver in the broad radiance of the moon. On either side were undulating shores, rich with lofty and luxuriant verdure. I saw the distant hazy outline of dusky purple hills. I heard the little waves plashing against hidden rocks and murmuring upon the sand. Delicious odors filled the air. A gentle breeze blew. Was this the lost paradise? This semi-tropic zone concealed behind a continent of ice and snow? Suddenly, from the tops of the dark branching trees came floating the sound of a bird singing, and so sweet was the song, so heart-whole was the melody, that my aching eyes filled with tears. Beautiful memories rushed upon me, the value and graciousness of life, life on the kindly sunlit earth, seemed very dear to my soul. Life's opportunities, its joys, its wonders, its blessings, all showered down upon the thankless race by a loving Creator. These appeared to me all at once as marvelous. Oh, for another chance of such life, to redeem the past, to gather up the wasted gems of lost moments, to live as a man should live, in accordance with the will of God and in the brotherhood with his fellow men. The unknown bird sang on in a cadence like that of a mavis in spring, only more tunefully. Surely no other woodland songster ever sang half so well. And as its dulcet tones dropped roundly one by one, the mystic silence, I saw a pale creature move out from amid the shadowing of black and scarlet wings. A white woman face, clothed in her own long hair. Slowly she glided to the vessel's edge, and there she leaned, with an anguished face upturned. It was the face of Sybil, and even while I looked upon her, she cast herself wildly down upon the deck and wept. My soul was stirred within me. I saw in very truth all that she might have been. I realized what an angel, a little guiding love and patience might have made her. And at last, I pitied her. I never pitied her before. And now many familiar faces shone upon me like white stars in the midst of rain. All faces of the dead, all marked with unquenchable remorse and sorrow. One figure passed before me dreamily in fetters glistening with weight of gold. I knew him for my college friend of olden days. Another, crouching on the ground in fear, I recognized him as who had staked his last possession at play, even to his immortal soul. I even saw my father's face, worn and aghast with grief, and trembled lest the sacred beauty of her who had died to give me birth should find a place among these direful horrors. But no, thank God I never saw her. Her spirit had not lost its way to heaven. Again, my eyes reverted to the mover of this mystic scene, that fallen splendor whose majestic shape now seemed to fill both earth and sky. A fiery glory blazed about him. He raised his hand. The ship stopped, and the dark steersman rested motionless on the wheel. Round us, the moonlit landscape was spread like glittering dream of fairyland, and still the unknown bird of God sang on with such an entrancing tenderness as must have soothed hell's tortured souls. Lo, here we pause, said the commanding voice. Here, where the distorted shape of man hath never cast a shadow, here, where the arrogant mind of man hath never conceived a sin, here, where the godless greed of man hath never defaced a beauty or slain woodland thing. Here, the last spot on earth left untainted by man's presence, here is the world's end. When this land is found, and these shores profaned, when mammon plants its foot upon this soil, then dawns the judgment day. But until then, here, where only God doth work perfection, angels may look down undismayed, and even fiends find rest. A solemn sound of music surged upon the air, and I, who had been one as in chains, bound by invisible bonds, and unable to stir, was suddenly liberated. Fully conscious of freedom, I still faced the dark, gigantic figure of my foe, for his luminous eyes were now upon me, and his penetrating voice addressed me only. Man, deceive not thyself, he said. Think not the terrors of this night are a delusion or of a dream of the snare of vision. Thou art awake, not sleeping. Thou art flesh as well as spirit. This place is neither hell nor heaven nor any space between. It is the corner of thine own world on which thou livest. Wherefore, know from henceforth that the supernatural universe in and around the natural is no lie, but the chief reality, inasmuch as God surroundeth all. Fate strikes thine hour, and in this hour 'tis given thee to choose any master. Now, by the will of God, thou seest me as angel. But take heed, thou forget not among men I am as man. In human form, I move with all humanity through endless ages, to kings and counselors, to priests and scientists, to thinkers and teachers, to old and young, I come to the shape their pride or their vice demands, and am as one with all. Self finds in me another ego. But from the pure in heart, the high in faith, the perfect in intention, I do retreat with joy, offering not save reverence, demanding not save prayer. So am I, so must I ever be, till man of his own will releases and redeems me. Mistake me not, but know me, and choose thy future for truth's sake, and not for fear. Choose and change not in any time hereafter. This hour, this moment is my last probation. Choose, I say. Wilt thou serve self and me, or God only? The question seemed thundered on my ears. Shuddering, I looked from the right to left and saw a gathering crowd of faces, white, wistful, wondering, threatening, and imploring. They passed about me close, with glistening eyes and lips that moved dumbly. And as they stared upon me, I beheld another spectral thing, the image of myself, a poor, frail creature, pitiful, ignorant, and undiscerning, limited in both capacity and intelligence, yet full of strange egotism and still stranger arrogance. Every detail of my life was suddenly presented to me in a magic mirror, and I read my own chronicle of paltry intellectual pride, vulgar ambition, and vulgar ostentation. I realized with shame my miserable vices, my puny scorn of God, my effronteries and blasphemies, and in sudden strong repulsion and repudiation of my own worthless existence, being, and character, I found both voice and speech. God only, I cried fervently, annihilation at his hands rather than life without him. God only, I have chosen. My words vibrated passionately on my own ears, and even as they were spoken, the air grew misty with a snowy opalescent radiance. The sable and crimson wings, uplifted in such multitudinous array around me, palpitated with 1,000 changeful hues, and over the face of my dark foe a light celestial fell like the smile of dawn. Awed and afraid, I gazed upwards, and there I saw a new and yet more wondrous glory, a shining figure outlined against the sky in such surpassing beauty and vivid brilliancy as made me think the sun itself had risen in vast angel shape on rainbow pinions. And from the brightening heaven there rang a silver voice, clear as clarion call. Arise, Lucifer, son of the morning. One soul rejects thee, 1 hour of joy is granted thee. Hence and arise. Earth, air, and sea blazed suddenly into fiery gold. Blinded and stunned, I was seized by compelling hands and held firmly down by a force invisible. The yacht was slowly sinking under me. Overwhelmed with unearthly terrors, my lips yet murmured, God, God only. The heavens changed from gold, crimson, and to shining blue, and against the mass of wavering color that seemed to make the jeweled archway of the sky, I saw the form of him whom I had known as a man swiftly ascend godlike, with flaming pinions and upturned glorious visage like a vision of light and darkness. Around him clustered a million winged shapes, but he, supreme, majestic, wonderful, towered high above them all, a very king of splendor, the glory round his brows resembling meteor fires in the arctic midnight, his eyes twin stars ablaze with such great rapture as seemed half agony. Breathless and giddy, I strained my sight to follow him as he fled, and heard the musical calling of strange sweet voices everywhere, from east to west, from north to south. Lucifer, beloved and unforgotten, Lucifer, son of the morning, arise, arise. With all my remaining strength, I strove to watch the vanishing upwards of the sublime luminance that now filled the visible universe. The demon ship was still sinking steadily. Invisible hands still held me down. I was falling, falling into unimaginable depths, when another voice, till then unheard, solemn yet sweet, spoke aloud. Bind him hand and foot, and cast him into the outermost darkness of the world. There let him find my light. I heard, yet felt no fear. God only, I said, as I sank into the vast, profound, and lo, while the words yet trembled on my lips, I saw the sun, the sweet earth sun, the kindly orb familiar, the lamp of God's protection. Its golden rim came glittering upwards in the east. Higher and higher it rose, making a golden background for that mighty figure whose darkly luminous wings now seemed like sable storm clouds stretched wide across the horizon. Once more, yet once, the angel visage bent its warning looks on me. I saw the anguished smile, the great eyes burning with immortal sorrows. Then I was plunged forcibly downward and thrust into an abysmal grave of frozen cold. 42, we're almost there. The blue sea, the blue sky, and God's sunshine over all. To this I woke after a long period of unconsciousness and found myself afloat on a wide ocean, fast bound to a wooden spar. So strongly knotted were my bonds that I could not stir either hand or foot. And after one or two ineffectual struggles to move, I gave up the attempt and lay submissively resigned to my fate, face upturned and gazing at the infinite azure depths above me, while the heaving breath of sea rocked me gently to and fro like an infant in its mother's arms, alone with God and with nature. I, a poor human wreck, drifted, lost, yet found, lost on this vast sea which soon should serve my body as a sepulchre, but found, inasmuch as I was fully conscious of the existence and awakening of the immortal soul within me, that divine, actual, and imperishable essence which now I recognize as being all that is valuable in a man, sight of his Creator. I was to die soon and surely. This I thought, as the billows swayed me in their huge cradle, running in foamy ripples across my bound body, and dashing cool spray upon my brows. What could I do now, doomed and helpless as I was, to retrieve my wasted past? Nothing, save repent, and could repentance at so late an hour fit the law of eternal justice? Humbly and sorrowfully I considered. To me had been given a terrific and unprecedented experience of the awful reality of spirit world around us, and now I was cast out on sea as a thing worthless. I felt the brief time remaining to me of life in this present sphere was indeed my last probation, as that supernatural wonder, the declared enemy of mankind, whom still in my thoughts I called Lucio, had declared. If I dared, after a life's denial and blasphemy, turn to Christ, I said, would he, the divine brother and friend of man, reject me? I whispered the question to the sky and sea. Solemn silence seemed to invest the atmosphere, and marvelous calm. No other answer came than this. A deep and charmed peace that insensibly stole over my fretting conscience, my remorseful soul, my aching heart, my tired mind. I remembered certain words heard long ago, lightly forgotten. Him who cometh unto me will I in no wise cast out. Looking up to the clear heaven and a radiant sun, I smiled, and with a complete abandonment of myself and my fears to the divine will, I murmured the words that in my stress of mystic agony had so far saved me, God only. Whatsoever he shall choose for me in life, in death, and after death is best. And closing my eyes, I resigned my life to the mercy of the soft waves, and with the sunbeams warm upon my face, I slept. I woke again with an icy shudder and cry, rough, cheery voices sounding in my ears. Strong hands were at work busily, unfastening the cords which I was bound. I was on the deck of a large steamer, surrounded by a group of men, and the glory of the sunset fired the seas. Questions were poured upon me. I could not answer them, for my tongue was parched and blistered. Lifted upright by my feet by sturdy arms, I could not stand for sheer exhaustion. Dimly, in feeble dread, I stared around me. Was this great vessel with smoking funnels and grinding engines another devil's craft set sailing around the world? Too weak to find a voice, I made dumb signs of terrified inquiry. A broad-shouldered, bluff-looking man came forward, whose keen eyes rested on me kindly with compassion. "This is an English vessel," he said. "We are bound for Southampton. Our helmsman saw you floating ahead. We stopped and sent a boat for rescue. Where were you wrecked? Any more of the crew afloat?" I gazed at him but could not speak. The strangest thoughts crowded into my brain, moving me to wild tears and laughter. England! The words struck clashing music on my mind and set all my pulses trembling. England! The little spot upon the little world, most loved and honored of all men, save those who envy its worth. I made some gesture, whether or of joy or mad amazement, I know not. Had I been able to speak, I could have related nothing to those men around me, could have comprehended or believed. Then I sank back again in a dead swoon. They were very good to me, all those English sailors. The captain gave me his own cabin. The ship's doctor attended me with zeal that was only exceeded by his curiosity to know where I came from and the nature of the disaster that had befallen me. But I remained dumb, and lay inert and feeble in my berth, grateful for the care bestowed upon me, as well as for the temporary exhaustion that deprived me of the speech. For I had enough to do with my own thoughts, thoughts far too solemn and weighty for utterance. I was saved. I was given another chance of life in this world, and I knew why. My one absorbing anxiety now was to retrieve my wasted time and to do active good where hitherto I had done nothing. The day came at last when I was sufficiently recovered to be able to sit on deck and watch with eager eyes the approaching coastline of England. I seem to have lived centuries since I left it, ay, almost an eternity, for time is what the soul makes it, and no more. I was an object of interest and attention among all passengers on board, for as yet I had not broken silence. The weather was calm and bright, the sun shone gloriously, and far off the pearly rim of Shakespeare's Happy Isle glistened jewel-like upon the edge of the sea. The captain came and looked at me, nodded encouragingly, and after a moment's hesitation said, "Glad to see you out on deck. Almost yourself again, eh?" I silently assented with a faint smile. "Perhaps," he continued, "as we're so near home, you let me know your name. It's not often we pick up a man alive and drifting in the mid-Atlantic." And mid-Atlantic? What a force had flung me there, I dared not think. Nor whether it was hellish or divine. My name?" I murmured, surprised into my speech how odd it was. I had never thought of myself lately of having a name or anything belonging to me. "Why, certainly. Geoffrey Tempest is my name." The captain's eyes opened wildly. "Geoffrey Tempest? Dear me, the Mr. Tempest, the great millionaire that was?" It was now my turn to stare. That was?" I repeated. "What do you mean? Have you not heard?" he asked excitedly. "Heard? I have heard nothing since I left England some months ago, with a friend on board his yacht. We went on a long voyage, a strange one. We were wrecked. You know the rest, and I owe my life to your rescue. But the news, I am ignorant." "Good heavens," he interrupted quickly. "Bad news travels fast, as a rule, they say. But you have missed it, and I confess I don't like to be the bearer of it." He broke off, and his genial face looked troubled. I smiled, yet wondered. "Pray speak out," I said. "I don't think you can tell me anything that will deeply affect me now." "I know the best and worst of things in the world, I assure you." He eyed me dubiously. Then, going into his smoking cabin, he brought me out an American newspaper 7 days old. He handed it to me, pointing to its leading columns without a word. There I saw in large type, "A millionaire ruined, enormous frauds, monster forgeries, gigantic swindle, on the track of Bentham and Ellis." My brain swam for a minute. Then I read on steadily, and soon grasped the situation. The respectable pair of lawyers whom I had implicitly relied on for the management of all my business affairs in my absence had succumbed to the temptation of having so much cash in charge for investment, and had become a pair of practiced swindlers. Dealing with the same bank as myself, they had forged my name so cleverly that the genuineness of the signature had never even been suspected. And, after drawing enormous sums in this way, and investing in various bubble companies with which they personally were concerned, they had finally absconded, leaving me well nigh as poor as I was when I first heard of my inherited fortune. I put aside the paper and looked up at the good captain, who stood watching me with sympathetic anxiety. "Thank you," I said. "These thieves were my trusted lawyers, and I can cheerfully say that I am much more sorry for them than I am for myself. A thief is always a thief. A poor man, if he be honest, is at any rate the thief's superior. The money they have stolen will bring them misery rather than pleasure. Of that I am convinced. If this account be correct, they have already lost large sums in bogus companies, and the man Bentham, whom I thought very acme of shrewd caution, has sunk an enormous amount of capital in a worn-out gold mine. Their forgeries must have been admirably done. A sad waste of time and cleverness. It appears too much the investments I have myself made are not worth much. Well, well, it does not matter much. I must begin the world again, that's all." He looked amazed. I don't think you quite realize your own misfortune, Mr. Tempest, he said. You take it quite quietly, you take it quietly by half. You'll think worse of it presently. I hope not, I responded with a smile. It never does to think worst of anything. I assure you, I realize it perfectly. I am in the world's sight a ruined man. I quite understand. He shrugged his shoulders with quite a desperate air and left me. I am convinced he thought me mad, but I knew I had never been so sane. I did indeed entirely comprehend my misfortune, or rather the great chance bestowed on me of winning something far higher than all the coffers of mammon. I read in my loss of the world's cash the working of such merciful providence and pity as gave me a grander hope than any I had ever known. Clear before me rose the vision of that most divine and beautiful necessity of happiness, work, the grand and too often misprized angel of labor, which molds the minds of man, steadies his hands, controls his brain, purifies his passions, and strengthens his whole mental and physical being. A rush of energy and health filled my veins, and I thanked God devoutly for the golden opportunities held out afresh for me to accept and use. Gratitude there should be in every human soul for every gift of heaven, and nothing merits more thankfulness and praise to the Creator than the call to work and the ability to respond to it. England at last. I bade farewell to the good ship that had rescued me, all on board her, most of whom now knew my name and looked upon me with pity as well as curiosity. The story of my being wrecked on a friend's yacht was readily accepted, and the subject that adventure was avoided, as the general impression was that my friend, whoever he was, had been drowned with his crew, and that I was the one survivor. I did not offer any further explanation, and was content to so let the matter rest, though I was careful to send both the captain and the ship's doctor a handsome recompense for their united attention and kindness. I have reason to believe, from the letters they wrote me, that they were more than satisfied with the sums received, and that I really did some actual good with those few last fragments of my vanished wealth. On reaching London, I interviewed the police concerning the thieves and forgers at Bentham and Ellis, and stopped all proceedings against them. Call me mad if you like, I said to the utterly confounded chief at the detective force. I do not mind, but let these rascals keep the trash they have stolen. It will be a curse to them as it has been to me. It's the devil's money. Half of it was settled on my late wife. At her death, it reverted by the same deed of settlement to any living members of her family, and now belongs to Lord Elton. I have lived to make a noble earl rich, who was once bankrupt, and I doubt if he would lend me a £10 note for the asking. However, I shall not ask. The rest has gone into the universal waste of corruption and sham. Let it stay there. I shall never bother myself to get it back. I prefer to be a free man. But the bank, the principle of the thing, exclaimed the detective with indignation. I smiled. Exactly. The principle of the thing has been perfectly carried out. A man who has too much money creates forgers and thieves about him. He cannot expect to meet with honesty. Let the bank prosecute if it likes. I shall not. I am free to work for my living. What I earn I shall enjoy. What I inherited I have learnt to loathe. With that I left him, puzzled and irate. And in a day or two the papers were full of strange stories concerning me, and numerous lies as well. I was called mad, unprincipled, thwarting the ends of justice, and sundry other names, while scurrilous civilities, known only to the penny paragraphist, were heaped upon me by the score. To complete my entire satisfaction, a man employed on the staff of one of the leading journals dug out my book from Mudie's underground cellar and slashed it with a bitterness and venom only excelled by my own violence when anonymously libeling the work of Mavis Clare. And the result was remarkable, for in a sudden wind of caprice, the public made a rush for my neglected literary offspring. They took it up, handled it tenderly, read it lingeringly, found something in it that pleased them, and finally bought it by the thousands. Whereat the astute Morgeson, as virtuous publisher, wrote to me in wonder and congratulation, enclosing a check for £100 on royalties, and promising more in due course should the run continue. Ah, the sweetness of that earned £100! I felt a king of independence. Realms of ambition and attainment opened out before me. Life smiled upon me as it had never smiled before. Talk of poverty! I was rich, rich with £100 made out of my own brain labour, and I envied no millionaire that ever flaunted his gold beneath the sun. I thought of Mavis Clare, but dared not dwell too long upon her gentle image. In time, perhaps, when I had settled down to fresh work, when I had formed my life as I meant to form it, in the habits of faith, firmness, and unselfishness, I would write to her and tell her all, even to the dread insight into the worlds unseen beyond the boundaries of the unknown region of everlasting frozen snow. But now I resolved to stand alone, fighting my battle as a man should fight, seeking neither help nor sympathy, and trusting not in self but God only. Moreover, I could not induce myself yet to look again upon Willowsmere. The place was terror-haunted for me, and though Lord Elton was a curious condescension, saying that it was to me he owed the free gift of his former property, invited me to stay there, and professed a certain lame regret for the heavy financial losses I had sustained. I saw in the tone of his epistle that he looked upon me somewhat in the light of a madman after the refusal to take up the matter of my absconding solicitors, and that he would rather I stayed away, and I did stay away, and even when his marriage with Diana Chesney took place, with great pomp and splendour, I refused his invitation to be present. In the published list of guests, however, which appeared in the principal papers, I was scarcely surprised to read the name of Prince Lucio Ximenes. I now took a humble room and set to work on a new literary enterprise, avoiding anyone I had hitherto known. For being now a poor man, I was aware that Swagger Society wished to blot me from its visiting list. I lived with my thoughts, musings on many things, training myself to humility, obedience, and faith with fortitude, and day by day I did battle with the monster, egotism, that presented itself in 1,000 disguises at every turn in my own life, as well as in the lives of others. I had to reform my character, to mold the obstinate nature that rebelled, and make its obstinacy serve the attainment of the higher objects than world's renown. The task was difficult, but I gained ground a little with every fresh effort. I had lived for some months like this happily enough, when the reading world was suddenly electrified by another book of Mavis Clare. My lately favoured first work was again forgotten and thrust aside. Hers, slated and screamed at as usual by the criticasters, was borne along to fame by a great wave of honest public praise and enthusiasm. And I rejoiced. No longer grudging or envious of her sweet fame, I stood apart in spirit, as it were, while the bright car of her triumph went by, decked not only with laurels but with roses, the blossoms of the people's love and honour. With all my soul I reverenced her genius. With all my heart I honoured her pure womanliness. And in the very midst of her brilliant success, when all the world was talking of her, she wrote to me a simple letter, as gracious as her own fair name. Dear Mr. Tempest, I heard by chance the other day that you had returned to England. I therefore send this note to care of your publisher to express my sincere delight in the success of your clever book has now attained after its interval of probation. I fancy the public appreciation of your work must go so far to console you for the great losses you have had both in life and in fortune, of which I will not speak here. When you feel that you can bear to look again upon scenes which I know will be sure to rouse in your mind many sad and poignant memories, will you come to see me? Your friend, Mavis Clare. A mist came before my eyes. I almost felt her gentle presence in the room. I saw the tender look, the radiant smile, the innocent yet earnest joy of life and love of purity that emanated from the fair personality of the sweetest woman I had ever known. She called herself my friend. It was a privilege of which I felt myself most unworthy. I folded the letter and put it near my heart to serve me as a talisman. She, of all bright creatures in the world, surely knew the secret of happiness. Some day, yes, I would go and see her. My Mavis that sang in her garden of lilies, some day when I had force and manliness enough to tell her all, save my love for her, for that I felt must never be spoken. Self must resist self, and clamour no more at the gate of fortified paradise. Some day I would see her, but not for a long time, not till I had in part at least worked out my secret expectation. As I sat musing thus, a strange memory came into my brain. I thought I heard a voice resembling my own which said, "Lift, oh lift the shrouding veil, spirit of the city beautiful, for I feel I shall read in your eyes the secret of happiness." A cold shudder ran through me. I sprang up erect in a kind of horror. Leaning at my own open window, I looked down into the busy street below, and my thoughts reverted to the strange things I had seen in the east. The face of the dead Egyptian dancer, uncovered to the light again after 2,000 years, the face of Sybil. Then I remembered the vision of the city beautiful, in which one face had remained veiled, the face I most desired to see, and I trembled more and more as my mind, despite my will, began to weave together links of the past and present, till they seemed growing into one and the same. Was I again to prey of evil forces? Did some new danger threaten me? Had I, by some unconscious wicked wish, invited new temptation to assail me? Overcome by my sensations, I left my work and went out into the fresh air. It was late at night, and the moon was shining. I felt for the letter of Mavis. It pressed against my heart, a shield against all vileness. The room I occupied was in a house not far from Westminster Abbey, and I instinctively bent my steps towards that old grey shrine of kings and poets dead. The square around it, almost deserted, I slackened my pace, strolling meditatively along the narrow paved way that forms a shortcut across into the old palace yard, when suddenly a dark shadow crossed my path, and looking up, I came face to face with Lucio, the same as ever, the perfect impersonation of perfect manhood. His countenance pale, proud, sorrowful, yet scornful, flashed upon me like a star. He looked full at me, and a questioning smile rested on his lips. My heart almost stopped beating. I drew back sharp breath. Again I felt the letter of Mavis Clare. Then, meeting his gaze fixedly and straightly in my turn, I moved slowly on in silence. He understood. His eyes flashed with jewel-like strange brilliancy I knew so well, and so well remembered. And drawing back, he stood aside and let me pass. I continued my walk back, and he stood aside. He stood aside and let me pass. I continued my walk steadily, though dazed and like one in a dream, till reaching the shadowed side of the street opposite of the House of Parliament. I stopped for a moment to recover my startled senses. Then again I saw him, the superb man's form, the angel's face, the haunting, splendid, sorrowful eyes. He came with his usual ease and grace of step into full moonlight and paused, apparently waiting for someone. For me? No. I kept the name of God upon my lips. I gathered all the strength of faith within my soul, and though I was wholesomely afraid of myself, I feared no other foe. I lingered, therefore, watching, and presently I saw a few members of Parliament walking singly in and in groups towards the house. One or two greeted the tall, dark figure as a friend and familiar, and others knew him not. Still he waited on, and so did I. At last, just as Big Ben chimed the 11:15, one man whom I instantly recognized as a well-known cabinet minister came walking briskly towards the house. Then, and only then, he whom I had known as Lucio advanced smiling, greeting the minister cordially in that musical rich voice I knew of old. He took his arm, and they both walked on, talking earnestly. I watched them till their figures receded in the moonlight, the one tall, kingly, and commanding, the other burly and broad and self-assertive in demeanor. I saw them ascend the steps and finally disappear within the house of England's imperial government, devil and man together. The end. Okay, so I have a couple of comments on this one. I know we went on a little bit. A little word about this. So this is the 19th century, and I understand what they were saying, but I also believe that self-indulgence harms no one as long as you are harming no one. Um, Money is not necessarily evil. I do believe that intentions are evil. I do believe that mankind can be evil. I believe that money, like alcohol, can make someone to be more who they are. If one is a happy drunk, one is a happy person without it. If one is a mean drunk, one is a mean person inside. It breaks away the inhibitor. Money is the same way. If one is kind with money, one is kind without money. But when people do have money and they are wicked, there's a certain man who comes to mind who purports to be a billionaire who is incredibly evil and wicked. Um, but there are also good people. So, with that, my loves, that was something. If you enjoyed this, and only if this gives you pleasure, you can find me on patreon.com/the gentleman psychic. You can join Patreon there. You can join me through my PayPal, rlillard6@gmail.com. You can find me on Venmo at Richard-Lael Lillard, Richard Lael Lillard. Anyway, my lovelies, again, if you would like to know more information on the painting and the donations to John Thompson and his family, you can find me on the Facebook page. And if you would like to book for a reading, find me at thegentlemanpsychic.com. Thegentlemanpsychic.com. Anyway, lovelies, good night. Thank you for story time. I have another story. We will probably start next week, though I do have some travelings to do this month. But anyway, my loves, thank you for joining me. It was lovely to have each and every one of you. Love to you. Good night.